Hi, everyone. Okay, please let me know if you can hear me now. Really appreciate you being here. I'm Jason Whitehead, co-founder of Success Chain, and we're here today to talk about mastering SaaS adoption and strategies for shaping ideal customer behaviors. I've got a lot of information to cover. We're targeting about 30 minutes, and the replay will be made available, and the slides will also be sent out as well too. So, hope you can sit back, take this in, and share in the chat any questions or comments that you have on the chat as we go through. My co-founder, Sue Abbott Moore, is in the chat on LinkedIn here, and she'll be responding to questions as they come up. And at the end, she'll filter out any questions or comments as well as that we might have. So thanks for joining us today. Um, oh, one second. Sorry, I see we're still having a bit of a technical issue here. Um, so hopefully this will work out okay as well too. Uh, okay, so let's jump in. So one of the things we want to talk about here is mastering SaaS adoption and what that looks like. And one of the questions I want to throw out to you is, what are the things like if only we could get our customers to do this? If only we could get them to take this action. If only we could get them to um, show up to meetings. If only we could get them to do change management. If only we could get them to drive adoption. What are the things that you think about that would, if your customers would do this, it would make so much more value for them and for you, and make everyone more successful? What would that look like? Where would you go? And some of the questions that often come up, or things that people say, God, if only we could get our customers to do this. Here's some examples that I've seen quite a bit. Would love to know what you've seen as well too. If only they would do this. If only they would show up to meetings. If only they would do some change management. If they would monitor adoption or take activities. Or God, I wish I could get my executives to show up to a QBR. Or God, I just wish they would return a phone call. You probably have a laundry list of behaviors that, if they would do this, would make all the difference. And I want you to think about those as we go through this, and even put into the chat, what are some of the things that if your customers would just do this, it would make them and you more successful all the way through. And then I want to think about, well, why are they not doing that? And what can you do differently to influence their behavior to get them to take some of this on? So I'm going to give you a really simple but powerful example that I love. And this is the coffee shop example. And if you look here real quick, and I'll move myself out of the way. In this example, one of the coffee shops realized people were coming in, they were being rude to their employees, they were creating an unhealthy environment, an unhappy environment, and they needed to do something differently. So they said, okay, if you just come in and say coffee or desi chai, it's £5. But if you say desi chai, please, oh, then it's £3. And hello, may I have a desi chai, please? And be a little bit more personal and professional and just positive, then they would have a lower price here. And what they realized is they could align their incentives a little bit differently to get a different behavior from their customers. And this is such a basic example, but I want you to think through, what are the things that you could do differently to drive your desired customer behaviors, and how easy could it be or how hard could it be, but how important would it be to get these right? And so in this example, you go into a coffee shop. I'm sure you've been there and you've seen people just be rude in front of you, and you get a little bit frustrated. Maybe they were never taught to be nice or polite. Maybe they're having a bad day, whatever it needs to be. But the reality is, it doesn't matter why. It's the behavior that you need to change, and so that's what we're going to focus on today. And so as we're thinking about this, I want to make a couple of important distinctions here. One is, what's the task that needs to be done? In this case, it's I need to get a cup of coffee. I need to enjoy a cup of coffee. And then what's the process? Because I'm sure most of you have come through and defined your processes very well for onboarding, for other things like that. So what are the steps that need to be followed? So for, in this case, you have to order the coffee, you have to pay for it, you need to collect it, and then you actually get to go and drink it. But there's very clear steps that need to be followed, and you kind of follow. But in this case, they are changing out the ordering process, and hopefully that will make the rest of it go differently. But the important thing is the behavior. And these are, what are the actions a person actually takes? What is their demonstrated behavior, their observable behavior that you could look at that makes the difference? And that's really what I want you to think about for your customers. What are those observable behavioral actions that what's really going on? So you can have the best process in the world defined on paper, but if people aren't following it, or if they're following some of it and not all of it, you've probably got some challenges here. So I want you to think about what that needs to look like and where you want to go. And so moving forward here, one of the questions is, what is ideal customer behavior? Just a quick definition that I've come up with here is, it's the set of desired actions and behaviors that your customers should take at each stage of the journey to drive mutual success. And it's very important. It's the mutual success. You're not doing this just for their success, but also for your success. And so there's a real alignment here. And can you think about all right, we've mapped out the steps in the process, but then look at how much is that process actually being followed? What's breaking down? What are our customers doing or not doing that we would like them to do? And those are the gaps that you need to try and fill here. And those are the things you need to figure out what we're going to do a little bit differently. So moving on from that, when you look at this, why are your customers still not adopting what you need your software? And what are the challenges here that you need to look for? And some of this is, um, they don't take the actions that you need. You have the process, but they're not actually followed. And the question becomes, you need to do something different. You need to have a new approach. You need to be innovative to shape their behavior. And so, if you've already mapped out the process, but it's not being followed, there's still a gap here, and you need to fill that. So, great, thank you. So we're going to talk about that. And the question becomes, how do you change someone else's behavior? How do you get them to take different actions? How do you get them to go through and um, how do you get them to go and do something different? And if only there was a magic wand, if there's just, I can do this and it'll just appear. And the reality is there's not. So you need to be a little bit more practical here. And so when I work with customers and I ask them, how do you change someone else's behavior? I get a lot of interesting answer. But the reality is, you don't. You can only change your own behavior, and that's where I start with use the Michael Jackson approach. Start with the man in the mirror. He had that great song that everyone always, I'm starting with the man in the mirror, asking him to change his ways. Look at yourself. Look at your team. Look at your internal organization. Look at what you're doing with your customers to think, what are the things that I can do to influence customer behavior? Ask yourself, are you rewarding poor behavior? And some psychologists say that whatever behavior you're getting, for some reason, it's exactly the behavior you're rewarding. And there may be a psychological reward, not a financial reward here. But if customers are not taking the steps and process that you would like them to take, the answer is that you need to do something different. And so when you look at this, what are the things you can change? And this really comes down to two things. You can change your own behavior, where you spend your time, what you say, how you show up, how you engage with folks, and you can change your environment. And this could be the policies, the processes that you have in place, your staff, your playbooks, your talk tracks, all of those great things. And so I want you to spend some time thinking about what are all the environmental factors that you can change that would influence customer behavior or your internal staff behavior, which will in turn influence customer behavior. And so for the rest of this presentation, I want to try and go through some practical examples to make this very real and very, very actionable for you. So we'll jump into that next. So one of the things I want you to think about is how can we start right up front during the sales process, maybe even during the marketing process, to shift customer behavior, shift how we engage with prospects during the sales process, and what do we need to look at? And one of the things that I find, especially with software companies all the time, is they talk about the features and the functions. They may talk about the business problems and the business results, but they don't dive into once you have the technology, how will you get people to use it? How will you manage change? How will you drive adoption? And this is a big missing piece here that needs to be addressed here. So some things that you can do that are very specific in here is you can investigate how much your customers have skills in adoption with their other systems already. And this will let you gauge really how effective are they at driving change, driving adoption, getting value from their technology investments. And if you ask them, tell me about what's the typical adoption level with your other software in your portfolio, and they come back and say, probably get about 10% of the value that we could have, or, we've got maybe 20% of our team using it effectively. If I look at any given application or if I look across all of them, it's pretty low. That will tell you they're probably going to have an issue adopting your software. And so the question becomes, what's going to be different here? And so you want to go through these conversations and you want to understand, does the customer realize that just having access to a software, which is what you're selling access to a software, you're selling access to features, you're selling potential for them. But if they don't take the actions internally to drive change and adoption, they're not going to get the business outcomes, which are so critical to renewals and upsells. So have that conversation about what else needs to happen in their organization. Evaluate their experience and expertise and ability to actually drive change and drive adoption. If they've never done it before, why would they do it now? What are you going to help them do differently to ensure a better result with your system and your software than what they've done previously in there? And given all of this, you should be able to go through and really forecast and say, oh, they've never gotten software done well. They've always had problems. You can ask them, how long have you had some of your other systems? And you can forecast through, given these experiences, how likely are they to churn? How likely are they to upsell? Given the lengths of your contract, maybe we'll keep them for 1 year, maybe we'll keep them for 3 years, but we don't think that, given their poor adoption skills and habits in the past, we don't think they're going to really have that capacity going forward. And you can say, oh, I think the lifetime value of this customer will be X based on their capacity to drive change and adoption success with any technology. And then based on that, and this is really critical, part of your customer education needs to be educating them on the resources that they will need for effective change management, the requirements to do change management, and that adoption doesn't just happen, that they need to be in there driving change, driving adoption, and really going based on that. Do they get it? Do they understand that just having the software won't be enough? And from there, the next piece during the sales process is really get their commitment to doing something differently to drive change and adoption, whether that's having executives show up and participate in the change and adoption process, whether that's making sure they have available resources, whether it's internal or consultants or your professional services, whatever it may be, to make sure that they have the resources necessary to drive change, to drive success, and drive adoption. Because without that, they are a high churn risk. And your cost to serve will go up, that the lifetime value will go down, and you should adjust accordingly based on that. But if they're open to these conversations, if they realize that there is a need that they've not filled before, if you can help them fill that need, suddenly their likelihood for success goes up and their likelihood of adopting goes up. So if this is part of the conversation you want to have during the sales process, one of the questions becomes, how do we educate our sales staff on this? And how do we get the sales folks to actually take the actions necessary to drive the success with our customers? So here's some practical things you can do. And this is just a quick list of this. The nuances and the details make a difference. And a lot of folks don't have the time to go there, or they don't have the expertise. But some things that you should look at is, what are your current sales processes and playbooks all the way through? And do you require your reps to discuss change management and adoption during the sales process? Do you get them to go through and say, yes, we've got the customer commit to it? Have we adjusted our collateral? Are we providing them tools around, here's the change and adoption process, here's change and adoption education if you don't know how to do this effectively? And then ultimately, one of the things I hear all the time from sales folks is, I work my comp plan. If you want your sales folks to have these conversations with customers, if you want them to get customer commitments to them, you need to include that in some form or fashion in their comp plan or in their evaluations or whatever it needs to be, so that the sales folks have a compelling reason to come through and actually have these conversations, which would be new to them and new to the customer. And one of the things you can do here is make your sales commission contingent on customers taking certain action steps or having other commitments as part of this, and including that in a handover process. We talked about this. This is what they committed to. This is the limitation, so that all the way through, everyone knows what's going on. But think about, if you want to change the customer's behavior, you've got to change your environment and your processes and your actions. You need to get your salespeople to change their actions when they're engaging with a prospect and customer. And if you can start right up front here, you're going to have some great results. Now, one of the other things, and this is a very practical one and comes up all the time, is basically changing some of your policies around discounting, giving away value to customers. And I hear all the time, I was talking with one client, and they said the CEO has authorized their sales folks to give away 35% discount to any customer without even seeking approval. They have that flexibility in our pricing, and they can go and do these things. And so many times the sales folks would say, all right, customer would ask for a discount, so they're going to give the discount. But they would get nothing out of it in return. They would close the deal, they would land the sale, but they wouldn't necessarily get the customer to take any action, and they would still lose the renewal. So one of the things I encourage folks is, stop giving away value and discount, or short-term value in the form of a discount or other things, but you exchange value for value-creating behaviors. If the customer will agree to do X, we will give them a discount for this. And that X needs to be something that will lead to their longer-term success, their longer-term adoption, and increase the likelihood of renewal or expansion down the road. So no one-way concessions, and really get your sales folks in this to say, okay, if you want to have this discount, I can make that happen if you do these steps. And we'll talk about that in a second here. But the idea here is, you've got to link value exchange, short-term value for the purchaser of the software in the form of a discount, free software, free services, for long-term value behaviors that will create those renewals and those pieces. And that's just a very easy policy, but it does require you to change the policy, and it requires you to educate your sales folks and to reinforce with them, like, okay, what are we getting in exchange for this discount? If we believe we have accurate pricing and fair pricing, and the pricing is appropriate here, and that we should be exchanging value for behaviors, then let's actually go and do that. Now, some folks or some organizations I've seen they know they're going to give away 35% off of most of their sales or 20%. So they jack up their prices above what they expect to be able to actually close the deal on. So people feel they get a deal. If that's the case, you may want to look at what is your baseline price and is it fair and reasonable. But if not, you can go through and make some of these changes. So let's talk about some examples of value creating behaviors. What should you actually ask for from your sales folks here? And I think one of the big ones here, and I'll just expand this a second here so we can see, there's a lot of things that you can look for. One can be get your executives to actively participate in the change and adoption process. Get them to champion this, get them to be demonstrating their commitment to success. Give them executive action plans for them to follow. Another big one, this is important. If your customers do not have experience or success with change management and user adoption, you need to help educate them on what are the things they should be doing as opposed to just leaving it to their own devices. So you can ask them to have a change plan or adoption plan. You can ask them to do this stuff. But if they don't know what to do, it's going to fall short. So part of your thing is empowering them and enabling them to really be masters of change and master of adoption on their own. A couple others that we see, getting people to show up to key meetings. I worked with one organization, and what we found is during the sales process, the executives were all on board. Once they signed on the dotted line, they turned it over to their administrators to implement the software, who had no idea what was expected or why they were doing or where this fell in the priorities. And as soon as we started to have the executives attend some of those initial onboarding meetings with their administrators, and we talked about success plans, then folks started to understand, oh, this is what the executive is trying to do. We could ask the questions and get the executive to direct their team to make this a bigger priority relative to their other initiatives where you want to go. So getting to 10 key meetings and ultimately achieving adoption targets. I was talking with one organization and they basically said, we have a complex problem process and solution that includes hardware and software. We should have customers live in 90 days, but several of them take 6 months or longer, 9 months to go through. So you can actually say, if you want a discount, if you want a rebate, whatever you want to call it, we will absolutely give that if you do this and go live by this date. If you do this and get this level of adoption in the first 90 days as measured by X, whatever it needs to be. So you can link value for targets that they achieve. And then looking through here, you also want to think through what are some of the other things over the long term. Are they sustaining adoption at a certain level over the long term? You can tie future discounts to usage. You can tie future discounts to the activities. Have they introduced you to other folks? Have they implemented new features or benefits, or have they implemented new functionality as you release it? So think through what are the actions that people can do, not just for the initial discount or initial access to things, but over the long term of the relationship that are going to be so important for you. So I'm sure there's a longer list. I'd love for you to put in the chat, and Sue would love to see what are some of the things that you would love to see over the long term that you could exchange value for if your customers would only do this. Okay. So let's talk about the need to another action that you can do is incorporating change and adoption activities into your onboarding process. So we talked about the sales process and we don't give away discounts. We talked about the need during the sales process to talk about change and adoption. Really ask the question, how will you make sure your people use this so you get the outcomes you want? We can give you the software, we can train you on it, we can give you the features, we can give you access to all of our libraries and our knowledge base and all the great stuff. But what are you prepared to do? And so now that you get into the onboarding phase, you need to really incorporate change and adoption activities into your onboarding process. And I've seen a lot of organizations where this doesn't happen. So some things that you can really look for is one, have an adoption and success plan. Come up with what are the activities, the milestones, the actions your customers need to take internally in their organization to drive adoption to get the results that they need. And once you've got this plan, then number two here is really looking at, do they have access to the skilled resources and change management activity, or people who can do the change management activities that can really execute on this plan? And they may have those folks and they may be available on the project, in which case you're in good shape. A lot of times what we see is people have folks who are new to technology or new to the organization, or this is a new role for them driving change and adoption because it's not normally in everyone's skill set. They may need some education around this. They may need some help with this. They may need, I need a coach around this. Or for large companies doing major enterprise organizations, they often have to bring in outside consultants and third parties to help them simply because they don't have the expertise or they don't have the capacity for the amount of work that is required. So if you're rolling out a system to thousands of people across multiple time zones and locations, you're going to need a team to help with this. And if your customer doesn't have that internally, you need to ensure that they acquire those expertise that they need. And then providing expertise on or providing training on change management and adoption. And you need this at a couple of levels. The executives need to have a baseline understanding of what's involved, more than just what they may have encountered in the past, but making sure they really understand why they need to do this, what are the steps, what's the timeframes that are realistic in here, and what is their role in driving change and adoption. Your team that's actually administrators or responsible for making this happen, they need more detailed skills and training to make sure that they're hitting all the marks and they're not missing important steps that can really sink their piece. And another key area that a lot of folks don't realize is the biggest driver of user adoption is the immediate supervisor of the end users, their manager, their supervisor, whatever it needs to be. And many times, those managers have never been asked to drive change or drive adoption within their team, and they don't know that it's their responsibility. They don't know the actions they should be taking. They don't know the targets they need to hit. So there's going to need to be some education and training at that managerial level to prepare them for their role in driving success with your software in their organization. And as you look through, obviously, there's other things as well too. Providing access to whatever professional services you need, and this is number five is really important. Setting clear targets and dates for all right. We need you at this level of adoption by this date, and here's the resources that we'll provide to help you get there. But if you can't make this transition, if you can't get there, that's going to impact the entire organization. Here's what happens next, and really setting clear expectations around what happens if they don't hit those adoption levels. So they need to be clear, they need to be obtainable, and you need to have a clear what happens next if we don't hit those. Okay. So the next piece to think about is what are the steps and actions you would take to drive long-term adoption? You know, gone through the onboarding, we've got people transition from the old way of working in the old system to the new way in the new system. But over time, things change and you have new employees come in, you have new competitive pressures, you will make an acquisition, you may have a layoff, new laws and regulations come in, people move around, they get promoted, they retire, all of that great stuff. What is it that you need to do to make sure that once you've achieved success once, you maintain it year after year over the life of the system? And you've got to get your customer to think about this. It requires you to have discussions with them and to make sure that they're taking the action. So one of the easy ones is obviously monitoring adoption. You can help do this for your customers during QBRs. You might offer reports for them, but ultimately, it's up to the customer to say, here's how we're going to monitor adoption. Here's how we're going to measure it. And here's the frequency in which we do it. And if we find there's changes, positive or negative, here's who's, or especially if adoption dips, here's the person who's responsible at the executive level for making sure we take corrective action and get where we need to be. Um, Another thing to think about is how do we optimize our rollouts of new features, new functions? So I've seen many times with software companies, oh, we've got a new feature, we've pushed it out as fast as we can. We've tested it some and we're going to fix some bugs. We may not have even trained our internal team. We might not have built out all the content that we need in our knowledge base of how to use it, where we want to go. And so roll it out and then it just sort of sits there for a while and customers aren't really adopting it. They aren't embracing it. You might have a new customer that you will sell it to, but existing customers don't necessarily bring it on. So you need to think through how do we incorporate change management activities and user adoption activities into new software releases, new rollouts, whatever it needs to be. Really look at that. Some of the things, obviously, we talked about, identifying trends at adoption levels during your QBRs with individual customers, looking at them across your portfolio of customers, all those great things. And then finally, providing those adoption resources and support and including that. I suspect, and here's a challenge for you, and I'd love your comments in the chat. How many of you actually have change management and user adoption resources incorporated into your knowledge base? How many of you have videos on here's how we drive change, here's how we drive adoption, here's how we can do these activities that are so important to getting the results that we want? And I want you to think through, and as you look at working with your development team, as you look at the folks who are your content developers and your content writers and create the videos for you, are you just teaching people on how to navigate the application, or are you helping them realize, oh, this is a change management activity we can do to drive adoption of this feature? Here's a target we should set. Here's a realistic expectation. And there's probably a lot of areas where you should be incorporating those adoption activities so that your customers get the value they're looking for. Okay. So just real simple here as you think through this. The steps are pretty easy to understand, but they can be challenging to execute. And if you need help with this, let us know. Success Chain can definitely help you with that. But one of the first steps here is really come through and identify what are those desired behaviors that you want. And we started this off with a list of some examples of things: showing up to meeting, having an adoption plan, working the plan, those sort of things. But look through with your specific customers, what are the things that they're not doing that you would like them to do to create more value for them and for you? where's behavior not matching up to process? Where are there gaps in process and behavior? What does that look like? And come up with really what is it we want to do or want our customers to do. And then from there, figure out how are we going to incentivize this? And incentives don't need to be just at the organizational level. They don't need to be just like a discount or a free resource or something like that. Part of it may be just having that discussion saying, here's what success looks like and putting it in the success plan. So don't assume that incentive has to mean a cash component to it. But really, how do you get people to motivate themselves to want to go and take the actions that you require? Part of it is identifying those actions. Part of it is asking for those. Part of it is removing any barriers that prevent those. And then obviously looking at the incentives and rewards for that. And then obviously monitor and measure your results, see where you are, see what the kind of activities that you're getting. And then based on those actual behaviors that you're observing and that you can measure, make adjustments and optimize and realize what worked this year may not work 2 years from now, or what used to work no longer does. We need to pivot and transition a little bit, or our market has changed, our customers have changed. So you've got to continually be working on that. And then obviously communicate clearly to your customers, explain the benefits, explain your policies in terms of whatever linked short-term value concessions for long-term value behaviors, those sort of things, but really make sure it's clear and transparent to folks. So that's really just a lot of what we wanted to go through. And as you think about this, there's a lot of clear actions that you can take. And it may seem, and I hope this seems like, okay, I've got a direction I could go. I'm recognizing some problems. I've got some new ideas coming in. But some folks may need help. And just quickly to let you know, at Success Chain, we're here to help if you need this, because some people don't have the capacity, some people don't have the time or the experience. So one of the things we can do is help you map out and identify your ideal customer behavior program. We can help you build and implement it. And again, as you've seen with your customer behavior, you can have a great process on paper, but if people aren't following it, changing their day-to-day work and activities in an observable way, you've got problems. And a large part of that was we talked about with a sales process, you need to change your sales folks' behavior, you need to change your CS team's behavior. If you have account managers, you change them, maybe support. And a lot of folks just need a facilitator, and we can help you with that. Real quick, we also have our Adoption Chain, which is our partner program, to help enable your customers to drive change and success. We'd love to talk with you about that, or check out our website at successchain.net. And then finally, one of the things that we offer as well too is we do have an e-learning course on mastering proactive software user adoption. I would love for you to go and check it out. You can see the QR code and the URL is there as well too. Or just contact us at successchain.net, and we'd love to have a conversation with you. This e-learning program, it's great for customer success professionals if you want to educate your team on adoption and change management so that they can better guide your customers and they can have more informed conversations and better influence them. They can learn new skills and things. But it's also designed, and we're happy to work with you, that you can provide it to your customers who may need direct hands-on help on change and adoption and education there. And we've got a couple of options for partnering with you on that, including some that are no cost to you to get there so that you're enabling your customers to drive their own success. So that's a lot of the questions, or a lot of the things I wanted to cover today. I know I went through this very quickly. I'm trying to keep tight to time frame, but I'm going to go and bring on my co-founder, Sue Nabbit-Moore, right now, and see if you have any questions or thoughts or comments, and we can go ahead and answer any questions that may come up, or ask Sue to share her insights and comments as well too. So Sue, welcome aboard. Glad to have you.
Yes, hi, Jason. Hi, everyone. And thank you, everyone, for your very interactive discussions. There have been a lot of comments going on with different people. So thank you very much to Todd, to Sydney, to Pascal, to Sangeeta, and to Darian for this very interactive exchange. So there was a question at the end, Jason, from Sangeeta, our friend Sangeeta, who is asking, what happens if you do provide discounts, providing that you reach certain targets? If the customer doesn't reach those discounts, what can you do in that case? Obviously, you can't give the discount, right? So, I think it's sort of a question of accountability. That's what Darian York has also been commenting as well. So what are your comments, Jason, on that? Have you seen that, and what happens basically? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've definitely seen those challenges, and I think there are a couple things you can do. Is one, you can structure your contracts and your arrangements so that there are specific milestones there, and perhaps it's we don't give the discount right now, but if you hit this target in 90 days, we'll give you a rebate. Or if you have people make not just one payment, but if you're making multiple payments, they can earn the discount on their future payments or some of those activities. So it really is a pay for performance. And if they don't hit the benchmarks and the pieces there, then they don't get the future piece. You could also put in your contract, and this is a bit harder, of basically being able to send a supplemental bill if they don't earn what they need to get there.
Mhm.
So that's definitely a challenge. One of the things that I would also point out to you is that if you structure a deal where, hey, we can earn this future discount if we hit this adoption target or if we do these activities, that actually empowers some of your customer executives to have leverage
Mhm.
internally. And they can now go and
Yeah.
say, we've got to hit this target. If we hit it by this date, it's going to save us X amount of money, or it's going to get us this extra thing. And if we don't, we're not going to get that. So now they've got a compelling reason to drive action internally. So sometimes that's actually giving them the leverage they need to use internally.
Yeah, I think so. You can even associate it with incentives. I've even seen that
Mhm.
several times, where incentives have been put into place, even if it's just periodic, to achieve certain objectives, right? So that's
Yeah,
another financial motivation, of course. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I think that's
yeah,
important.
that's great. There was another really interesting comment as well from Todd Kirk, who was talking about the fact that, when you're trying to accelerate adoption, he talked about the adoption wave. And
Mhm.
that's usually something you put into place only when the customer cares. And he put an interesting consideration there where you can actually create the wave. So you can be proactive in creating the adoption wave and not just waiting
Yep,
for the customer to ring the bell, if you like. So I think that's a really
absolutely.
interesting perspective from Todd. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And I would also love to see if you have CS teams or an onboarding team, having some of them, whether or not they have a financial incentive in their comp plan, but having one of their benchmarks or their target metrics be what level of adoption are they doing and what are the different activities they need
Mhm.
to engage with customers around creating that wave early. Because I think that's really important. How do we make that happen? And sometimes just having someone who's paying attention to that makes all the difference.
Absolutely. So that. There was a lot of comments as well going on, because you gave great focus, Jason, to the gap between what is being sold up front by the sales and what is being delivered afterwards by the customer success.
Mhm.
So that is something which a lot of people have commented on. I know it's a big frustration a lot of the
Yep.
time of customer success. So probably just to finalize, maybe just a few tips on how to get sales people really defining up front, what is good, what it means to be good in terms of adoption and
Yep.
performance,
Mhm.
and how that is then aligned upstream downstream with customer
Downstream.
success.
I think that
Yeah.
that's so important as well too. And a lot of sales folks, they're just not even having these conversations around how are you going to get there. And
Yes.
there are a couple of things you can do. We talk about working the sales comp plan, and part of it might be having the sales folks say, "I'm not worried about winning the sale. I'm worried about winning your renewal, and I'm worried about what
Hmm.
happens 2 years from now because of course you're going to come with us. What do we need to make sure you
Yeah.
stick around?" And you can do some compensation for folks around the renewal piece. But I've seen organizations where they come through and say, as part of our process, before we, our internal executives, will sign on a contract with a customer, our sales team needs to put this information in the CRM, or they need to have a letter that has the customer sign their commitments to doing this and their agreed action plan of what the customer will do. So you can institute this and write it down during the sales process. Customer commits to
Hmm.
this by this date. We commit to that by this date. And I think
Yeah.
the act of doing that, whether there's a financial incentive or not, the act of getting people to commit to something, putting their name on paper, is a very symbolic act, but it does drive behavior as well too.
Mhm.
And so that can be
Yeah.
a no cost way to do that. But you've got to require that, and you need to make sure that your sales folks are actually having these conversations. And I think there's also a lot of folks that sales leaders who will review sales calls and review the recordings and provide feedback and coaching on those. If you see
Hmm.
your sales folks are not having these required conversations and not driving customer behavior, that needs to be a coachable moment for you as a sales leader.
Yeah, and even giving those sales leaders and their teams incentives around that kind of behavior, right? So,
Yep.
absolutely. I've even seen where this is even contractualized. So,
Mhm.
I was working at a startup here in Paris where we actually put into the contract what kind of adoption behavior the customers and the users at the customers should be doing during their first 3 or 4 or 5 months during the onboarding.
Oh wow,
So
great.
that's something was actually contractualized. So that is a
Mhm.
real motivation, incentivization to drive behavior, right?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
as I think about that, especially during the onboarding process, when I've been on customer calls, when I've been working with the software companies directly,
Hmm.
um, so many times they're not having these change management discussions during the onboarding process. They're not putting it in there. And the simple act of requiring a success plan, requiring an adoption activity, or adoption plan.
Mhm.
Like we've talked about, providing education for customers, because many times customers are like, oh, I don't know really what to do. I mean, we'll train people on it.
Mhm.
Or, oh yeah, we'll
Mhm.
tell them it needs to be done by this date, but they don't really think through the nuances, and they don't have the experience to say, if we do this, it's going to bite us in the butt. We should do this instead. By educating folks on that as part of the onboarding process, really ups your chance of success tremendously, and ups your chance that
Yeah.
the customer will renew and give the testimonials and all that great stuff that comes from success. And I think more organizations, if they move beyond the feature and function to how we make sure our customers take the actions to create value with the features and functions, that's a different question that really has a lot of
Yeah.
results.
It's the environment which you need to take into consideration and have something very precise and articulated. So it needs to be designed. The whole adoption process needs to be designed. It's not something which you take by chance.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Well, thank you so much to everyone who attended. And again, we'll be sending out the slides and we'll send out the replay. Please share this with others. If you would like more information about what we offer and how we can help with that, please contact me or Sue. We'd love to have a conversation with you. And thank you so much. We will be doing another webinar next month. So watch out for that. And if you're not following Success Chain on LinkedIn, please go ahead and do that. So you'll get notified about what's coming next. So thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone, for your contributions, and see you again at the end of next month with pleasure.
All right. Take care. Bye now.
Yeah, bye.